Hello, hello. Welcome to the Good Garbage podcast. My name is Ved Krishna. My primary reason for existence has been to find ways to leave our wonderful planet cleaner. We will be speaking with material innovators, creators, and propagators to learn from them how we can build for scale and towards a regenerative future. The idea behind the conversations is to explore ways in which our waste materials generate life. Their stories will help us answer the big question, what is good garbage? I'm so happy to share this conversation with Dr. Oded Shoseyov of the Hebrew University with you. Israel is such a hotbed of innovation. The creativity, ingenuity, and urgency in its people truly drives the nation. When it comes to Oded, he has published over 200 articles, has over 62 patents in his name, is the founder of at least 14 companies, has worked in the nanobiotechnology area for over 17 years. It is a truly inspiring dialogue, and I hope you will enjoy it as much as I did. Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Good Garbage podcast, and I'm super excited to have a hero of mine, in a way, Oded Shoseyov, join me today. Thank you, Oded, for this opportunity to talk to you. You do know I'm a big fan of yours, so I may have some nervous moments. If I do, please forgive me if I stumble anywhere. Oded has been creating materials for a while, 30 years or 32 years now, Oded, right? 62 patents, the last I saw. A title that has been given to him is the man who just can't stop inventing. I obviously listened to your TED talk, and if anybody is in the material space and hasn't heard your talk, they must. And I was totally blown away. And you don't know this bit. My father passed away because of a heart failure due to his valve not working after 15 years.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
So before they could even change the valve, it just lost. So it is a personal. It was a very personal journey for me as well when I heard you talk on that specific subject as well. So for the listeners, I heard your talk and I tried to contact you, but of course with 14 companies and the amount of work you do at the Hebrew University, it was so difficult. But I finally managed to do that, and I just like again, you may not know this, but I took literally a flight the next week as soon as you responded, and I said, okay, I have to go to Israel to meet Oded, and what a meeting that was, and I've learned so much from you. So Oded, I'm going to jump in now. Can you think about your earliest memories as a child about packaging? How did that take you on your journey, which has obviously gone in many, many directions?
So, when I say packaging, for me, I think the earliest memory and probably the one that somehow dictated my career later on was I was born to a family of farmers. My father used to grow vineyards, and at a certain point of time, we had table grapes. And as a kid, when everybody, during summertime used to go for campings, I used to go to help my dad in the vineyard very early in the morning, 5 a.m. In the morning to harvest the grapes. And my role was to fold the cartons, the cartons that we used to pack the grapes. So I think that if you tell me the words of packaging in childhood, this is the first thing that comes into my head. And I think that over the years, I saw how hard is agriculture on one hand, but on the other hand, I was always impressed by my father's love to the plants, to be there in the vineyard. I knew that I really want to go, after graduation and high school, and in Israel we also have the 3 years army. I really wanted to go to the university, study agriculture, and go back to work with my dad in the vineyard to get some knowledge and help to improve things. Long story short, I ended up at the university, never came back to the vineyard. But I think that the time that I spent understanding how sustainability is so important, not just for agriculture, but actually for our life, brought me very, very quickly to the understanding that we really need to do things differently.
Yeah, wow. And so, just a follow-up question on that. You did study winemaking, and then how did that transition into being nanotechnology and all the other things that you do? How does that connect?
So actually, it all started in the last day of my undergraduate studies. Just when I did my bachelor degree in agriculture, I was walking in the hall, and I met who will become my supervisor, and he was Professor Benami Bravdo. I took one of his courses in viticulture, and he asked me, "What are you going to do?" So I said, "I'm going to go back to my dad, to work in the farm." So he said, "Why don't you come to do your master's with me?" So I scratched my head and I said, "But I think that the bachelor degree is enough to work on a tractor." They said, no, I mean, there's still a lot of things to learn. So I decided to give it a chance, and first time I got into the lab, I realized that I'll never leave this place, because it really brought me back to childhood. It's like you're in Disneyland, and you have now the possibility to play with nature, and find new things. And I followed his supervision, and my PhD was in fact on biochemistry of wine flavor. And I remember that I kept asking him, "What do I have to do to become a professor at the university?" I knew that I really wanted to do. He said, "Well, the first thing you have to go to do a postdoc, but then make sure that it's not going to be something that you did already. Don't follow your PhD. Just do something totally different and innovative, new, something that is really new." So I kept asking myself, what is the next thing? And remind you, this is 1987, early days of molecular biology and protein engineering. And I didn't know anything about it, but I realized that it's fascinating. I was lucky to get accepted to do my postdoc at UC Davis in California, in one of the best protein engineering labs. 3 years later, I got my position at the university, so he was right. And then I for some time, I was working in the department. I was still looking for my new way. And when the Nano Center was established, I always give credit to our former president, Shimon Peres, who was really a visionary. 20 years ago, we went to the government, and he said, Israel have to invest in nano centers.
Wow.
And he was able to convince the government to put $500 million in 5 nano centers. So each university got $100 million, which was a lot of money that time.
Yep.
And again, I remembered what my supervisor at the time told me. Always look for the new things. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know anything about nanotechnology at the time. And admittedly, nanotechnology was still being dominated by inorganic chemists, physicists. So I came to the Nano Center and said, I'm going to take, the lead on nanobiotechnology. Mm-hmm. So they said, well, what is nanobiotechnology? I said, I'll find. We'll find together.
We're still figuring it.
Yeah. And, nanotechnology was actually invented by nature. In nature, things are built by themselves. I mean, everything is self-assembled. Mm-hmm. And these are the principles of nanomaterials, that they self-assemble.
Yeah.
Very quickly, I found out that you can find really amazing materials in nature. And in fact, they're so much better than everything we do. Just remind me, it's something that happened to me last week. Uh-huh. I have one of my students, she is working on nanocellulose, and she is taking nanocellulose and make different cellulose films, and we measure their piezoelectric properties, which means that you take this film and you press it, and it generates voltage. Okay, so you can generate electricity from that. There are a lot of applications for for piezoelectric materials. And we published a few years ago that nanocellulose has piezoelectric properties. Mm-hmm. So we tried to improve it. And then last week she came to me and said, listen, I found really an amazing paper that came from Delhi. There was a guy there that he also tested the piezoelectric properties of biomaterials. If you read the paper, it says the following. I went to Delhi market and I bought a pomelo, citrus. Yeah. And then within the pomelo, when you cut it out, there is a white skin. So he took this skin, simply just the skin, dried it, and tested its piezoelectric property. What he found out that when you press it, he got 10 times more voltage than what my student was doing with very sophisticated nanomaterial that she prepared. We're trying to make piezoelectric materials. Yeah. I mean, the industry makes them from ceramics and they use, temperatures like, 1000 centigrade, and it's brittle and sensitive and so on. We take nanobiomaterial, we try to assemble it, okay, but we invested a lot of efforts. This guy went to the market, took a pomelo, ate the pomelo, I guess, in the lab, and from the remaining, he got a piezoelectric material, which is 10 times better than everybody else. So that's just to say, I mean, this is, you said, this is garbage. I mean, the garbage, this is better than the garbage. This is better than the original.
Yeah. So I've loved your ideas in your talks, and you always reference the sequoia tree. For me, what has been very interesting is this whole photosynthesis mechanism where the tree takes carbon from the atmosphere and creates cellulosic fibers, sugars. And of course, there are some minerals that are taken from the ground, but it's fundamentally carbon from the air. So do you see a future where we as humans, instead of cutting things and making things, and can actually even make sugar-based fibers, ideally from thin air, or a more additive process instead of a subtractive process?
I am positive that in the future, simply because today genetic engineering of plants is becoming a more and more common practice, and more specifically technologies like genome editing, CRISPR-Cas, and so on, that really introduce a new and rich toolbox to geneticists. And so I think it is very likely that in the future we will be able to engineer plants that will be more suitable for certain packaging materials. Yeah. We may, at the end of the day, cut the tree or still do some processing, but I think that most of the bleaching processes that we're using today will be avoided because it will be much more suitable for the material that we want to, or the product that we want to make out of it. And in addition, I think that we will find in the future other sources of materials. I can share with you that I'm today also working with an Israeli startup that found a very elegant way to make a biocompostable plastic. Okay. Packaging, for many applications you can use paper, but there are still some applications that thermoplastic processing may be required. What they found out is a very interesting way to take regular seaweeds and use that to feed halophilic bacteria. These are bacteria that really love salty water, and they know, these bacteria, how to convert the sugar into a thermoplastic biocompostable polymer called PHBV. PHBV has been known for some time, but it's a wonderful thermoplastic material with relatively low melting temperature, can tune the properties, and unlike PLA, that if you want to recycle it, you have to take it to the factory. You can put it in your composter, and a few weeks later, it's gone.
It's upcycled.
The only problem is that it costs a lot of money. But they, I think, came up with a very interesting idea to take very inexpensive seaweeds. They don't compete with anyone on these seaweeds. The seaweeds also, they make photosynthesis, so they absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and from the water. And in addition, we still have much more ocean than land.
That's amazing that you mentioned that, because I was doing my master's in biomimicry, and of course, my whole focus was how do we find better packaging, and and one of the things that I got truly influenced by was sea kelp or seaweed. You could have, huge storms in the ocean, but it just has this elasticity and it moves and it sways and it sort of stays. And it's beautiful because what we found was that when we are manufacturing pulp and paper, typically our processes align the cellulose at about a 25-degree angle. In a sea kelp, it is 60 degrees.
Wow.
Just by reorienting the fiber, it was possible to create huge elasticity. And I know that the Weiss Institute used chitin from spare shells, and they created some films. I did talk to them, and at least what they informed me then was that it wasn't possible to scale it up. So that was their challenge. So the passion for me has been that of flexible films, and how do you create structures in order to have the multi-layered metallized films. So we were looking at different barriers in nature, and air barrier was also becoming an issue. So we were looking at this, and we found that the Alaska pollock fish, because of the cold temperatures, has excellent oxygen barrier properties. But then, how does one take that gelatin, basically, and you talk a lot about collagen, and how does one take that protein, that amino acid, and then create it? So the two questions is, how do you see that translating? Like, okay, I've found this inspiration. It's amazing. Of course, it's evolved over time in certain conditions. But now I want to take this and maybe microbially multiply it. That could be one method. And then how does one scale it up and apply it? How do you see that evolving?
What you're saying, first of all, makes a lot of sense. And I think also that the sea world can give us some really amazing things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, first of all, it's very interesting that that the proteins also have oxygen barrier properties. It probably has to do with the fact that they gelatin self-assemble.
Yeah.
Okay, on one hand, but in addition, on the other hand, it has a lot of hydroxyl groups.
Yeah.
And we know that good oxygen barriers like nanocellulose or PVOH, they have a lot of hydroxyl groups. But the trick is not just the presence of hydroxyl groups. You really need to have this very intimate collating polymer structure, so that when the oxygen try to go through, he will have to go through tunnels and really have good chance to hit on hydroxyl groups that will form hydrogen bond and retain the oxygen. So I think that assembly is one thing that need to be considered. As far as a production, then again, I think the plants or in the future maybe seaweeds can definitely produce for us all these proteins in copious ways. I mean, I am, of course, most of my work is in plants, because in plants the expression systems in agriculture is more advanced than in the sea. But I am sure that people will find out ways to produce valuable materials in engineered seaweeds in the future.
And when you say expression system, expression mechanism, what does that mean?
Expression means, for me, it means that I get a gene from insect and I stick it into a plant, and now the plant express this gene, which otherwise, this gene is not found in plant, like collagen that we've done. When, for example, plants don't make collagen, but because now when you have technology, you can express collagen gene in a plant.
For those who don't know, you took collagen and put it in a tobacco plant and grew that. And of course, you could do numerous things in the medical field, especially with that. So why tobacco?
So several reasons why they decided tobacco. First one was because when we produced human collagen in plants, our aim was to use the collagen for medical implants, for injectables for human being, and the FDA prefer that if you are going to introduce human gene into plant, prefers that the plant will not be in the food or the feed chain. For safety reasons, and obviously tobacco is not edible by plants or by human or animal. But there is another reason, and that is if you are going to produce your protein in an annual plant, like potato, for example, then you'll have one season. At the peak of the season, you have lots of potatoes done. Now your factory can process it for the entire year. So you have to store it and so on. Tobacco, we can grow 4 cycles a year, all year round. So we can supply to the factory the fresh leaves every day. So production is more homogeneous and it's much easier.
Makes sense, yeah. So I was talking to my dear friend who you may know as well, Gavin McIntyre from Ecovative, who created a lot of stuff from mycelium. And he said a very interesting thing, which is something that you, in passing, also referred to. And you talked about seaweed, and he again mentioned similar things. Like the idea for me, what has been fascinating is this whole field of microbial multiplication, bacterial kind of multiplication. And since I heard about that, it's just been this thought process that can one really grow packaging? But everything in nature is packaged and so beautifully packaged. So if I look at, say, a corn hull, can I take that corn hull, which is such a beautiful structure and can be so good because it's so structured so well as a packaging material, and then create multiples of that? And then how can that be done at scale? Do you see that as a process that would happen in the near future?
First of all, I think that it can be done at scale. We need really to combine between cellulose, which is hydrophilic, to other materials which are more hydrophobic. So we'll be able to enjoy both the oxygen barrier strength on one hand and water barrier properties. So I can envision in the future technology where you have think about a frame, okay, like a reel-to-reel that goes into. They have like a matrix that goes into a bath. That in the bath maybe you have something like a gluconobacter that can produce a bacterial nanocellulose, okay, and it goes from there, and it grows, then goes into another bath that actually now takes the bacteria, okay, and then it goes to another bath where you have some kind of filamentous fungi that grows on that and provide the water barrier.
Wow.
And it goes out, dry or mold it, and dry it as a mold. I mean, I'm sure that it can be done. The principles are there. What we have to do is to take the building blocks and do the right engineering to make it happen. And you can even think of even more advanced things like today we have, for example, bacteria that makes carotenoids. The red carotenoids, and of course orange and all these colors. So you can even paint it, with this bacteria. And because they're the carotenoids are antioxidants, so they're pigments, but also protect from oxidation, and everything is sustainable. Everything you can actually eat it probably. We just need to look how things are done in nature and try to mimic that rather than reinvent the wheel from where our building block is fossil oil, which is not really sustainable.
Yeah, that takes me to an amazing quote of yours where you actually said that, and this was again music to my ears. I think you ended your TED talk with this idea that we will not come out of fossil fuels because fossil fuels run out, but because biomaterials will be better.
Exactly.
So coming back to just the example of, say, the corn hull, how would you go about deconstructing it? Is that easily possible with the technology today, or is that still evolving?
Well, it depends. I mean, first of all, if you talk about the corn hull, I'm sure that with the current technologies, we can we can definitely, study and pretty much analyze each one of the components there. The question is, what do we need to learn from that? I mean, I assume that the structure of this corn hull is such that it's perfect for the corn. Once we try to use it for something else, we may have to compromise on something, because most probably what we want to pack it with doesn't have the properties of corn, doesn't have the requirements of corn, and maybe the shape of corn. Maybe I want to pack an iPhone with that. I believe what we should do is just try to really understand the principles in which nature protect things, like the good example you gave, and just use these principles to do better engineering of the packaging we make. I'm not expecting that we'll grow packaging material. It will be the size and the shape of the smartphone. It could be nice, but maybe it's not that necessary.
And you would be taking land away, which is another challenge.
Yeah, yes. But think about what I just told you before. This factory with a reel-to-reel system that you have. You can create a material, and this material is going to be a film. It's still wet, so you can mold it. You can do whatever you want. It's like a paper mill. That downstream will be the converter. Mm-hmm. The converter will take this from the reel and will do what it wants. If you want to make a packaging for a smartphone or a packaging for fruit, you will do it. By the way, I think that in the future that the packaging will be so thin and so effective that you won't even see it.
Wow.
I can think of things like that. Like imagine today when you have cornflakes or muesli, we have a carton, okay, and inside we have a laminate. Mm-hmm. The laminate is there to protect it from photooxidation. But in fact, the carton already does its job as far as a UV light. Now we need just to give it an oxygen barrier.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take all these cornflakes, and the raisins and the almonds and the nuts there, and you coat it with a film of nanocellulose.
Yeah.
There is only 500 nanometer film thick. You don't really see it.
Yeah.
But it provides all the protection you need, okay? Because oxygen is not going to penetrate. So you don't even need the laminate. It will be only in the carton.
And it probably provides a little more fiber to your body.
Yeah, of course.
So when we look at nature, all packaging grows with what is inside and dies with what is inside. So in a way, the way nature is created, and of course, it has all the other, it'll give you an expiry date by wrinkling and, our skins and everything else around us. And, it has all these indicators, whether it's good, it's not good. But the challenge that I find is that the way nature has done things is basically till it's alive, the packaging is also alive. And once the substance dies, the packaging dies as well. So in a way, what you are saying makes a lot more sense, that you can't just take something and say that I'm going to adapt it, because that's going to be the other challenge if it's alive. So you have to take the idea and then adapt it to packaging.
You said exactly what I mean, that we need to learn from nature, but and understand the principles, but not necessarily do exactly the same, because we are manufacturing things differently. You see what's going on these days with alternative proteins. The people start to make cultured meat, texturized vegetarian proteins. So I think that we will have factories and manufacturing processes where we process either vegetable proteins or other things to products. Okay, and these products need to be stored somehow, packaged. But the packaging could, so it's not, what I'm saying is that we need to study and learn from nature, but not necessarily do exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there are also some good ideas that a human being came up with, and we shouldn't just give up on them.
Yeah.
And one good example is there is no animal that reached the moon from Earth. Well, but man was able to do it already in the 60s. So, maybe wasn't such a good idea, but but this is another thing to argue. But what I'm saying is that a human being can be still innovative beyond what nature does.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you can say that we are also part of nature. So the fact that we got to the moon was it was
part of that,
because we're natural.
Yeah, but closer to even if we look at the plastics that we've created, that's such a magic material in the end. Okay, we have a different problem of disposal, but if you look at it, and if you look at flexible packaging in particular, it's ultimately it was a waste product from petroleum. But the whole idea of the barriers, because today we open a bag of crisps, maybe 6 months from the manufacturing date, and it'll taste as good as yesterday, right? So of course it's human ingenuity, and we can, like you say, like we have to create better materials. It's not about running out of fuel. It's about, evolution and creating better biomaterials. And the two thoughts that came to me before was this whole domain that you've been exploring of DNA sequencing and multiplication. How do you see that playing in the process of building packaging materials? The next one is around barriers, but I'll go on to that after.
So I think that it plays a major role, and it really really connected to your comment before, which I totally agree. I mean, thermoplastic materials and of course, all the extrusion technologies and all that are really amazing manufacturing technologies. The only problem is that the materials that were picked probably were not sustainable and problematic, but the concept is amazing, and we should continue to do that, but with biodegradable, compostable thermoplastic material. So that's one thing. And this is really, but our ability to do it effectively really relies on your second question, which relates to DNA synthesis and sequencing, and that's revolution. I mean, it is a revolution, and I can tell you that when I was a postdoc, I remember that we used to do the sequencing ourselves. We had to build this big gel, and it was very, very slow. I mean, it took me 1 year to sequence a single gene, and it was amazing at that time. Today, you take a DNA, you send it to the lab, and you get the sequence the next day.
Wow.
And you can sequence the entire organism for very small money. The price of sequencing dropped dramatically, so that's one thing. But also the DNA synthesis. Today, when a student of mine needs to synthesize a gene, so he's just doing the computer, the design, and send it to the company, and a couple of weeks later you get the gene back.
Amazing.
And in fact, because it is so cheap, he's not just synthesizing one. He makes 30 versions of that.
Wow.
And so the technology enable, it's this, because of the advances and because of the affordability, we can improve on production systems, natural production systems like bacteria, fungi, yeast, plants, of course, seaweeds, and so these are going to be our manufacturing plants, not fossil oil chemical reactors.
And they will be able to build different sequences to enable different materials.
Everything. In fact, the future is that in the future you will be able to put on your computer what are the mechanical properties that you wish to have in your material, and the computer will tell you which polymer you need and where to produce it, and if you need to modify the chemical nature of that molecule, it will suggest the DNA sequence that you need to change for the organism to make what you need.
Wow, that's
and it's not like something that will happen in 20 years. This is going to happen in less than 10 years from now. No doubt. People are working on that already.
Yeah, I actually went to the Ginkgo Bioworks lab and I was blown away. I'm sure you've visited or known about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, stunning. The amount of equipment that they were investing in, the kind of work they were doing in this whole DNA sequencing space was so stunning. And I hope that I'll be able to get someone on this talk to learn more from them as well. And so just for the audience sake, so earlier the way we would create nano crystalline cellulose was basically by a lot of mechanical grinding, which meant huge energy. And then, of course, I managed to visit your lab and saw that you were doing it so differently through chemistry. So we'd love to hear more about that, and also how you see Because the challenge that we face today, and I'm sure you hear about it enough, is ultimately the difference in cost. And how do you see that coming down so that we can get the right barriers in order to be able to get the right moisture and oxygen, off and create better biomaterials?
First of all, as you mentioned, there are many different ways to make nanocellulose. What is unique with the technology that we developed was we simply looked at each one of the processes that on one hand you need to hydrolyze and get rid of the amorphous regions of the cellulose on one hand, and once you end up with crystals of the nanocellulose, you need to recover it in a cost-effective way. And what we have been able to do is for each step to introduce very effective recycling systems. So very little waste comes out, and also the acid that we use, we actually recover it again and again and again in the process. As far as the cost goes, I think that just like any technology, the cost is driven by scale and location. Scale and location. And what is unique about the technology that we developed at Melodia is that it is very suitable method to be integrated into pulp mill, because the pulp mill has already inputs and outputs that can serve the nanocellulose production. And so I believe that in the very near future, cost of production of nanocellulose will drop dramatically, which will make it feasible for even very simple products. By the way, already today, if you want to make flexible packaging, which is 100% paper-based, okay, no aluminum, no polymers, no plastic, nothing, at a competitive price, you can. Wow. It's already there. We are already there. And I think that the industry will dictate basically this change, and it's happening because, as I'm sure you know, Nestle, which is probably one of the largest food manufacturing companies in the world, they made a declaration that in 2025, none of their flexible packaging will be made of polymers. So this is a very, very strong statement. And the only way to make such a statement is that you look at the technology and say, hey, it's possible. It will take some time, but it's possible to do it. And this is what's going to happen. There is no way back.
And do you see both water vapor and oxygen barriers coming from the same nanocellulosic substance, or do you see a different structure?
No, it's different structures because at least what we at the university and at Melodia developed was it's actually two different coatings. Of course, everything is bio-based, but oxygen barriers inherently comes from nanocellulose, but water barrier is more from fatty acids. Yeah, just like plants, in plants, the cuticule is not made of cellulose. It is made of waxy material.
And how do you, so the other challenge that we see is that ultimately you have to try and use the same supply chain because you can't disrupt everything at the same time in order to go to scale. So one of the challenges that comes with that is heat sealability. Does the nanocellulose manage that, or do you have to give another layer?
For sealing, some of the water barrier uh, can provide that, but otherwise you can. There are solutions for that as well, which are another coat, which enable the sealability.
That's so wonderful to hear that you are already seeing it actually happen at commercial scale. And you're absolutely right. An integration with pulping, and I'm sure you guys are looking at it, would enable it to scale significantly and then be able to change that whole material space. So another very interesting material that I came across recently, and I'm sure you've heard of it, is this whole idea of using minerals, and it's called stone paper, for some example. It's not really paper, but using calcium carbonate and integrating it with HDPE initially, but 20 to 30% HDPE, and then making pellets and blowing it up in regular extrusion technology. Again, you can, I'm sure there is a way to replace the HDPE part through a biomaterial and again take it to a technology which is the same supply chain. You make pellets and you put it into the extrusion cycle, and people can make bags or whatever.
Yeah, so I think that essentially it goes back to what we discussed before with thermal with bioplastics like PHBV, which I believe can be modified to replace high molecular weight polyethylene at the end of the day. It still requires some more research, obviously, but I think it is possible. I would refer you to one of the papers that we published because and the reason I say it is because when people talk about high molecular weight polyethylene, materials like Dyneema and so on, which are really very 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 strong plastics. We've published a couple of years ago a paper where we actually made a composite of nanocellulose with a PVOH, and we were able to achieve a toughness of 200 megajoule per cubic meter. Just to give you a feel, Kevlar, which is very strong fiber, is about 50 megajoule per cubic meter. Achilles tendon, which is the strongest material we have in our body, is about 7. Spider silk, which is the strongest material ever, natural, is 150. Combining PVOH and nanocellulose is 200.
Wow.
So it doesn't have to be one material, but composition of two interesting materials they complement each other, can end up with very very tough materials. So and toughness is of course the energy to break. So it's really what you need.
Yeah, and that's very similar to nature as well, right? The building blocks may be few. It could be sugars and amino acids, and you could have a few minerals and a very small part of the periodic table, and voila, you get the toughest
Yeah,
materials and the most flexible materials, and it's those building
exactly,
blocks, which is very
exactly.
similar to what you're saying, and it's always combination.
Yeah.
And I even see, combination and sizing, like you're talking about nano, and then you have,
Yes,
and how do you create the building structure is something that is
absolutely.
amazing when you look at nature.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
So I've been researching all you do, and it's amazing. How do you do what you do? Like 14 companies, obviously research, being at the Hebrew University.
So I think that the secret is to work with young people.
Aha.
and to really have the focus on the students because they always come up with some really good ideas. And all they need is just a good guidance. This is one thing. The second thing is keep yourself curious about things that go around you. I really believe that we can do more than one thing. So just continue to be curious about things around you and work together as teams and not just an individual. And by doing that, you can achieve a lot.
Yeah, wow, it's really amazing to read all that you're doing. So, just to take a cue from what you were saying in terms of young people, I know that you are invested in numerous companies, ideas, technologies. Where do you see which companies or people are in the space that are inspiring you, or are companies that are inspiring you?
I will answer to that like that. I was once asked by a reporter, why do I stay at the university? He said, you have a nice office, but I'm sure if you go to the science park with one of your companies, you can get a really nicer office and more space and so on. So I told him I will never leave the university. He said, how come? I said, because all the ideas, everything that I have comes from this spring of ideas.
Wow.
And he said, what is that? I mean, it's the young students. He said, how come? He said, because they think out of the box.
Yep.
He said, but why? How come they think out of the box? And I said, because they still don't know where the box is. and I really mean it. I think that the more we learn, we become more and more focused. We tend to throw away good potential ideas.
Yeah.
So this is really the secret. The secret is to listen to your peers that are younger than you. And it works for me.
Wow. And that's how you get new investments and new ideas in place then. So it drew a parallel, what you said to the reporter. There's a friend of mine who sends very nice quote. He sent me a card which said, the honeybee is so structured that the body size is way bigger and the wingspan is really small. Aerodynamically, it cannot fly, but it doesn't know that, so it does anyways. So similar to the students, they don't know that they can't fly, so it's
Yeah,
perfect, you do it
amazing.
anyways. So just my last question, Oded. So what does good garbage mean to you?
Good garbage is simply a stream of raw material for something.
Wow, it's just mimicking nature.
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Oded. This was wonderful, but I'm going to also let you, in case there's anything else you want to add for the people who will be listening in, if there are any directions, any recommendations, would love to hear.
So I'll just say that I really enjoyed, again, to have a discussion with you. And I think that what you're doing in Good Garbage is really important. It's important for the world. It's really important for the future of us, of our children, grandchildren, and really keep up the good work.
Thank you, Oded, and thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I look forward to more and more conversations with you.
Thank you very much.